What happens when Congress tells a Chinese-owned app, sell your US business or get kicked off American phones? Welcome to Unboxed Origins. I'm Howie, your resident science geek and accidental trivia sponge.
And I'm Wyatt. I ask the big questions. Sometimes philosophical, often skeptical, always curious.
Today, we're digging into how did the TikTok divest-or-ban law race through Congress? Picture a mashup of political theater, national security briefings, creator panic, and lobbyists on espresso. The story starts with a simple technical and legal problem. TikTok is an app with a wildly effective recommendation engine, owned by ByteDance, a Beijing-based company. For years, security officials warned that Chinese law could compel companies to hand over data to state intelligence services. That was the tailwind, a background national security anxiety. That pushed the question from is TikTok safe to can we allow it at all? Lawmakers leaned on that anxiety and asked a blunt question. If ByteDance won't separate US operations from Chinese ownership, should the app be banned from US phones? The first gust of real political wind arrived in targeted skirmishes, state and federal bans on TikTok on government devices, and repeated congressional hearings where FBI and intelligence officials testified about data risks. Those hearings were theatrical, complete with dire hypotheticals about surveillance and influence operations. Meanwhile, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, which handles transactions that might threaten national security, had already begun to be central to the playbook. It can require divestments or block deals. Lawmakers and national security hawks began to see a two-pronged remedy as attractive. Force a divestment so that US data, algorithms, and infrastructure are in American hands, or ban the app if divestment didn't happen. The race dynamic picked up when politicians smelled urgency and public attention. With midterms and presidential politics looming, signaling toughness on China was a bipartisan vote winner. Bills and amendments were drafted that moved faster than the usual legislative molasses. Not because the technical problem was simple, but because political incentive structures rewarded speed. Committees scheduled hearings, leadership fast-tracked bill text, and negotiators stitched together a divest-or-ban framing that wrapped national security, consumer protection, and political theater into one package. The framing was simple and dramatic. Give ByteDance a timetable to sell US operations to trusted buyers or see the app restricted. It's a messaging victory. Voters could understand divest or ban far more easily than a nuanced set of data flow rules. On the other side of the aisle, or rather outside the beltway, creators and small businesses raised a very loud complaint. TikTok wasn't just a social app, it had become a livelihoods platform, especially for younger creators, musicians, and local businesses. A forced divestment would disrupt creator monetization pipelines, ad networks, and the muscle memory of how audiences were reached. Imagine telling a chef, a seamstress, or a dance troupe that the stage they built their fans on might vanish. Lobbyists took up both causes. Civil liberties groups warned about free speech implications of removing a major public square, while tech industry players lobbied quietly about precedent. No company wants the government picking winners and forcibly rearranging markets.
Aha! Here's the twist that tends to get lost in the shouting match. The divest-or-ban remedy treats ownership like a binary switch for risk, but the technical pathways for influence and surveillance are messier. Data flows and algorithmic influence don't magically vanish with a corporate restructuring. Servers, third-party code, content moderation policies, and the architecture of recommendation systems are portable and replicable. In other words, selling the US app might cut one administrative cord to China, but it wouldn't necessarily eliminate every operational or supply chain vulnerability. Worse, rushed forced sales can create opaque proxy ownership where the same influence persists under a different name.
Exactly, and that contradiction fueled rival legislative drafts. Some lawmakers pushed for structural solutions, hard data residency, audits of algorithms, onshore infrastructure, and oversight provisions that would, in theory, reduce risk regardless of ownership. Others wanted the blunt instrument, If ByteDance doesn't sell, we ban. The bill that accelerated through Congress combined both, a public ultimatum plus a promise of technical safeguards if divestment occurred. That combo made it politically attractive. It reassured hawks with the threat of a ban, while promising technocratic fixes for people who cared about continuity for creators and commerce. But actual congressional speed came from a parallel motor, floor politics and the calendar. When leadership in either chamber decides a vote matters, for messaging or for rallying a coalition, committees move fast. Amendments get folded into must-pass spending bills or into widely supported national security legislation. If a bill can be couched as protecting Americans and winning over moderates, it can be expedited. And the TikTok bill had unusual bipartisan traction because it let members signal toughness on China, without costing them an obvious domestic constituency, certainly simpler than taking a stand on, say, healthcare or taxation. Lobbying heated up precisely because the stakes were both financial and reputational. ByteDance deployed a legal and PR war, public letters from creators pleading for their livelihoods, paid ads, and a legal argument that bans would violate First Amendment protections and be practically hard to enforce. Meanwhile, US tech firms quietly vetted the idea of buying the app. Others watched with equal parts envy and fear. Lawmakers received briefings from intelligence officials, testimony from privacy advocates, and piles of op-eds. All that noise compressed the timeline. More pressure meant faster votes.
Aha! And here's another overlooked corner. The legal and enforcement reality of banning an app. Congress can pass a law forbidding app stores from offering TikTok or forbidding US transactions with a foreign adversary-linked platform, but enforcement is messy. People can sideload apps, VPNs muddle jurisdiction, and international digital commerce resists neat physical borders. So, the ban part of divest or ban plays well rhetorically, but is technically porous. That gap between theatrical ban and enforceable reality created urgency. Lawmakers wanted to be seen acting because the actual practice of enforcement would be harder and slower than the vote suggested.
Those contradictions produced courtroom fireworks, too. Civil liberties groups signaled immediate legal challenges on First Amendment grounds. Companies and creators suggested contingency plans, new platforms, migration strategies, and more hybrid monetization models. Economists chimed in on the cost of disruption, both lost revenue and the chilling effect on platform innovation, and international diplomatic consequences surfaced. China warned of reciprocal measures, and allies wondered if the US was erecting a precedent for extraterritorial control over global platforms. That diplomatic dimension made the issue larger than domestic politics. It put trade and national security into one box labeled high stakes. In the end, or at least in the run-up to the critical vote, the divest-or-ban push that rocketed through Congress was the product of many forces aligning. Real national security concerns, a political environment hungry for China tough signaling, a compressed congressional calendar, and a noisy public debate driven by creators and lobbyists. The bill's momentum was turbocharged by the fact that it offered a clean narrative, protect Americans from foreign manipulation. But underneath that narrative lay messy trade-offs, effectiveness versus symbolism, legal enforceability versus political theater, and the question of who decides the rules for global digital commons.
So why does any of this matter beyond the partisan talking points? Because it's not just about TikTok. This episode revealed a new governance pattern. When digital infrastructure becomes geopolitically contested, lawmakers default to blunt instruments, divestment, bans, or ownership requirements, because those are politically legible. The risk is that easy-to-say solutions can produce complex technical and legal problems downstream. We're watching how democracies choose between open markets and protective controls. And that choice will sculpt the digital public square for years, affecting creators, journalists, and even the architecture of speech.
Practically speaking, creators learned to diversify audiences, platforms learned to harden security narratives, and regulators learned that technical fixes, like forcing data localization or mandating algorithm audits, are harder to legislate fast than a headline-friendly ultimatum. The divest-or-ban sprint through Congress created policy momentum and public attention, but also a policy paradox. The faster Congress moves for visibility, the fuzzier the technical details often are when implementation time comes. That's not a knock on elected officials. It's the nature of policy when technology moves at internet speeds and law moves at calendar speed.
Final thought. Laws like the divest-or-ban effort force us to confront an ethical, constitutional, and practical jumble. How do we protect national security without hollowing out free expression? How do we regulate algorithmic influence without turning enforcement into a geopolitical blunt instrument? And perhaps most philosophically, when governments regulate platforms that are also social commons, who gets to decide the rules of that commons? Those are not easy questions. And the race through Congress gave us a dramatic, imperfect answer.
If you're a creator, a user, or a policymaker, the takeaway is to pay attention to the mechanisms, not just the slogans. Divest or ban is a pithy headline that helped speed a response. But the long-term work of securing data, ensuring transparency in algorithms, and protecting speech will require nuanced lawmaking, technical standards, and often slow bureaucratic work that no campaign ad will celebrate.
And remember that the tools we build and the laws we pass are mirrors of our priorities. When we decide that ownership determines safety, we set one kind of precedent. When we insist on auditable architectures and due process, we set another. The stakes reach beyond TikTok. They're about how we govern the digital public square itself.
If you like this unpacking, like, subscribe, and share to help more people understand the machinery behind the headlines. So when Congress tells a foreign-owned app to sell up or get kicked off American phones, what are we really choosing? A quick fix for a political moment, or the beginning of a new chapter in digital governance?